Imagine if you lived in a country that spoke a language and you did not speak the language of that country. You would be pretty useless because you wouldn't be able to communicate with others. We live in nature, and there's a divine pen that keeps writing and drawing all those shapes in nature. It's a message, a subtle energy message, subtle energy information being constantly drawn in front of us, and unfortunately nobody reads. Biogeometry is all about design related to life force and consciousness, because geometry is, geo is the earth, metry has to do with measurements of the earth, that means land survey basically, as it was in ancient Egypt. And when you put geo with bio, you're moving to another dimension. You're moving from the physical to the subtle energy level. So biogeometry means measuring the life force of the earth. Bio here is a life force, and it includes consciousness, of course. And that makes the earth a living being and in which we are part. We do not live on the earth, we live in the earth, because we live inside the atmosphere of the earth, which is part of the earth itself. So we are part of this living being, just as our immune cells or blood cells are part of our being. So when we act, we have to act according to the general laws of the being in which we are part. So we will start from there, looking at the language of nature. Nature needs to be understood, and it is understood through the principles of its design language. So let us go further into the design language of nature and see what is different in this design language from other design languages that we use. We have to look at the design language of nature, try to understand it. In nature, we have to see how things grow, how life force interacts with natural shapes. The moment we mention life force as a major component in the development and growth of natural shapes, we enter into multidimensionality of nature's design language. It's not a design language that acts in the physical world. No, it's a design language that is multidimensional. So for example, if I want to contain a liquid, I design my cup in a way that contains this liquid. If it's a flat surface, it won't contain it, so it has to be designed in a certain way to contain it. Okay, that's containing physical matter. Now, we want to contain the full life force. The full life force in nature has so many levels. It has vitality levels, it has emotional levels, it has mental levels, and all levels are different levels of consciousness at the same time, and there are all the laws of nature are working through all those levels. So here we are dealing with a physical shape that contains multidimensionality of subtle energy levels. That means the physical shape is only a very small part of the total living shape in nature. Now, how can a physical shape contain things that are elusive to it? The only way that it can do it is through resonance. And resonance, we should understand that with a musical instrument, string instrument, for example, if you hit one string, every eighth string or every string with double or half its length will resonate with it. So the law of resonance goes from 0 to infinity. The law of resonance, when things are in resonance, there is a sort of bidirectional information exchange. And this information is how this energy affects us. Meaning, that it's qualitative. So qualities, as we know, for example, musical notes are an effect on us. They are qualities. Sounds are qualities. And we know that they repeat themselves on the different octaves. So that means a quality actually exists in all levels of nature from 0 to infinity. Qualities are different than quantities. Quantitative aspects are limited to certain ranges, while qualitative aspects are universal. Any quality in the universe is multidimensional. So here, the shape itself on a physical level is designed in such a way that every angle in that shape resonates with a certain level of subtle energy that's invisible. So certain principles, design principles that we're going to look at in the design of shape will make this shape resonate with emotions, with mental levels, with spiritual levels, or with vitality. And we have those shapes, those geometrical shapes that resonate with all those levels. We can use them in biogeometry to access information on all those levels, either to find disturbances on the different levels or to correct them, disturbances on the different levels. So we have our sort of shape codes for the different subplanes of nature, and we have rulers on which we can detect everything on the subplanes of nature. That is why when we are studying the multidimensionality of nature's design language, we actually have the practical tools of doing the research. Now, how does something physical connect to the higher dimensions? Now, the resonance is achieved. The resonance with higher dimensions is achieved. The connection happens through vortices. So you have a vortex like that connects between every dimension. So if I draw here, if this is one dimension, physical dimension, and then I have a vortex like this vortex can connect to another dimension, and you can have a third dimension, and so on. So those vortices, they're bidirectional spirals. They connect between planes of nature. So while this one is our visible plane of nature, these are invisible planes of nature, the higher planes of nature. They're invisible. So every natural shape here, imagine this thick line to be a natural shape in nature, has this multidimensional connectivity all the way to an archetypal level here, an archetypal level. The archetypal level is a level where the patterns or the templates of all shapes are stored. And so the templates, the energy templates, come down here and govern the shaping of this shape here in whatever shape. It is governed by the shapes. We call that the archetypal dimension. You have the human template, you have the plant template, you have the tree templates, and all those are communicated down here. They are communicated through emotional levels, mental levels, and so on. All those levels are consciousness levels. They come down here. So there is growth. Let us look at a human being. I get my friend here. This is a statue, and we've dealt with this in our courses. Now, I can actually measure centers of rotation on the statue. I have centers of emission of life force. Now, the centers of emission of life force are related in a way to the shape. Like we said, the shape of the container connects to all the higher levels, and it connects that through the vortices. So in a human being, we have 7 major vortices here that we call the chakras. One on the head, here, and heart chakra, stomach chakra, procreation chakra, base chakra. And then we have some other chakras above and some other chakras below. Now, if I can measure the chakras, those vortices, on a statue, it means that the shape creates the connective vortices to all the higher dimensions. Now, a statue on a physical level is not alive, but through its shape, it contains all the other dimensions. So actually, a statue can be a container of all the higher dimensions and transmit them. I can take them from the statue, transmit them to me. So I can actually interact with the chakras of the statues. This means that chakras are basically a result of a forming process. We have a law that says subtle energy, formed or shaped, produces function. So when we look at natural shapes, like let's go a bit inside the body and see how an open energy system like the human being interacts with subtle energy outside. Subtle energy, that means life energy, exists outside. Now life energy is drawn in. I draw it, let's say, through my breath. I draw in and out. When I draw in life energy, it goes into the lungs. Now, the lungs are shaped to produce the life energy in such a way that give it a certain function. So the energy is formless. The subtle energy comes in with all the functions together. Now, every time they have to be rearranged in such a way optimal for the function they produced. And that happens through the shaping of the body. How the lungs shape the subtle energy to produce the energy needed on that level. Let's say the stomach will do it in a different way. The energy coming into the heart will do it in a different way. So the shape of every organ will give subtle energy the functions that are needed to be produced on the physical level. And at the same time, those shapes create the vortices needed for the multidimensionality of interacting with energy. You breathe energy, your lungs, the shape of your lungs should actually be fine-tuned to all the levels of subtle energy. Otherwise it will lack. It should be fine-tuned to vitality, to emotions, to mental, to spiritual. So the design of the shape of the lung will act with all those levels to produce the needed function. So in a statue here, I can actually, since there are functions related to the shape of the body, I can activate one or the other, make it stronger than the other. So let's say if I move the center of balance of the shape like that on the heart level, see, on the heart level like this, I will accentuate this chakra. On a stomach level, accentuate this chakra. On this level, accentuate this chakra. So here we understand that the chakras are shape related, form related. They are created on the physical level through the forming process on the physical level to connect, so that the forming process creates chakras, energy wheels, that produce multidimensional vortices that connect with the higher levels and bring down life energy into the shape. So it is all about making living energies. Now, we have a problem in our civilization. When we developed modern science, we excluded the human being from all our experiments because we thought that the human being is too subjective, too opinionated, and things like that. And subjectivity gives very complex variables in any experiment. But it doesn't mean that they cannot be studied, those complex variables. We can go into them. But it makes things so complicated having a subjective effect in creating a physical experiment that we decided to keep the human being out of our scientific experiments. So we developed a scientific world, we developed modern technology with the human being out of it. So what should have been done? I mean, when I have a formula, any formula, whether I'm building a chip or building anything, if I add the human variable to it, but that means I'm adding emotional, mental, spiritual concepts, I'm adding subjectivity, I'm adding all those things in the formula. Yes, we should have a sort of a dynamic variable in there that contains so many secondary variables in it that reflect the subtle energy of life, that reflects life force. So life force becomes a major variable in the formula of our scientific experiments or in our scientific worldview, then we would be building a civilization for human beings or for living beings. But what we are doing now is we have created a very advanced civilization that gives ultimate leisure and pleasure to humanity, while at the same time being at the cost of the human being. There's something wrong in this formula. We are building a civilization that depletes life energy. That means our civilization is sucking out the life energy out of the living systems in nature. And that means reduced life energy means reduced immunity. That means as we go along, as civilization advances, immunity is reduced, and we end up with so many types of pandemics that will actually sooner or later end life on Earth.